Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we are going to be continuing our discussion on wide receivers for the upcoming 2019 and 2020 season. Except this year, we'll be discussing some people I think that might fall a tier or two, maybe even further, based on extremely early evaluations of how they ended last year's regular season, how I predict this offseason to go, or various other things. Like my other videos, it is important to know that in this NFL offseason, it's really early. The NFL draft, free agency, everything is underway. So we got to take these with a huge grain of salt, and things might change. That being said, there's a lot of reasons to think that these guys might fall below where they finished last year, and I think that they will. So these guys are all ranked above 25 in terms of season or average totals. And without further ado, the first name on the list I'm going to discuss today is Julio Jones. That does pain me as I was really high on him last year, and this year I have to be really low on him, I feel. He did finish the year as number 4 last year, and I think that there's just so many negatives around him going forward. I think that offense is going to lose Tevin Coleman, obviously, just another weapon, and I think they'll be able to key more in on Julio Jones. They have the third least amount of money in free agency, so I don't really think with that they're going to upgrade their offense tremendously. They do have a middle round pick, so they might pick up a running back to replace Coleman, but or another wide receiver, but I doubt it. They might look at Hawkinson at tight end, but I think that they're more going to look towards the defensive side of the ball. And early indications, I don't really see this offense getting better. I just see it getting worse with losing Coleman. They'll probably move forward with Devonta Freeman, who you're betting on his health to stay for a whole season, which hasn't happened for a couple years. Julio might see some double teams. He's also turning 30 this year. He also ended last season injured. So all of those peripherals, and then you add in the fact that he had 8 touchdowns in his last 9 games. Those 8 touchdowns were more than he had in 2017 and 2016. And I understand that last year scoring went up, but because of that, he was a big benefactor. And if his numbers just came around to the median a little bit more, and everybody else's numbers go up, I just don't really see him repeating that. And I see him, like I said, facing more double teams, being keyed on more on other teams' game plans. And I just don't see him finishing a top end number 1. I mean, I have him as a probably number 6 conversation right now. Definitely behind Hopkins, Adams, Beckham, Hill, and Michael Thomas. So about then I'll start to think about taking Julio, and for sure I won't be getting him. So I think he has a chance to fall outside that tier 1, and I'm not going to be picking him most likely. So it's unfortunate, but it's got to happen. So moving on, the next name on my list is Tyler Lockett. He finished last season as the number 16 overall receiver. A lot of that was due to Doug Baldwin being out and getting fed targets and good opportunities in his first 5 games. After that, he had more than six targets one time all year. And then past week 5, there was a 50-50 chance that he was going to score even 10 points. So he's just a really inconsistent player in general. I think Baldwin coming in will just slide him into that natural number 2 wide receiver position. His TD count for his career, which has been 4 years, was 6, 1, 2, and 10. I'm not really seeing him as a guy who's going to get that TD count again. That's going to get him to number 16. And if he dwindles down to 6 and then even below that, he's not even in the wide receiver like 3 conversation. So just not betting on him at all. And even with that being said, you're thinking, oh, he had a bunch of blow-up games. His highest game was 20 points. So that's not really going to single-handedly win you a week or anything. So he might be a nice wide receiver 2 on the Seattle Seahawks, But for what that's worth, I don't think that that's going to translate into really anything higher than, like I said, a wide receiver 3 for the season. And I will, like I said with Julio, not be getting him. And I think there's a chance he falls a few tiers, maybe falls out in general. So definitely moving on from Tyler Lockett onto a little bit of a slam dunk, easy one, Emmanuel Sanders. Won't go too deep on him. Finished last year 23rd. He had a week 13 Achilles tear. So that's really devastating injury, especially for somebody who relies on his speed like Emmanuel Sanders. They're saying he's probably going to start the season, but even if that's the case, he's just going to be rushed back. So that would not really excite me either. Um, we don't even know how he's going to be with that sort of injury. So those are really devastating to athletes in general, and his position and how he plays that position. Also hitting age 31. I just saw the pickup of his option. It was only 6 million for the Broncos. He's a mentor to Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hand, so there was no reason for him not to be back. But I see him more as the wide receiver 3 on that team, not really a super insane passing offense, more of a run offense team, win with defense. I do like what they did with Keenum, but I would not pick him as any higher than like a wide receiver 4. A flyer on him is like a wide receiver 5. So I don't see any way he doesn't fall a bunch. His draft position will probably be reflected in that, but yeah, not really buying into Emmanuel Sanders. Just a couple more names, but these guys were based on average instead of the season total. So Cooper Kupp obviously averaged around 11th in terms of wide receiver points per game. Uh, he had a week 10 torn ACL, so just like Emmanuel Sanders, if Sean McVay says, oh, he's going to be back to start the season, he tore his ACL. So I'm not really late on, so that's not really making me super anxious. It's more like, oh, you're bringing him back too early. That's not really good, especially because Josh Reynolds looked good after he filled in for him. Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks are going to get theirs in general. So I'm definitely not going to be picking him as, say, in the wide receiver 2 or maybe even the wide receiver range. So once again, like all these other names, I'm not going to be getting him because really early on, that's where around he's being drafted on Fantasy Pros is around wide receiver 2. So also see the Rams offense and regular season kind of coming down to earth. I think they're going to lose a few more names in free agency. Teams usually have a little bit of a hangover after their Super Bowl. I would predict them to make the playoffs again, given that division with the Cardinals and the Niners, but they might be fighting for it with the Seahawks, and they might not. So I definitely don't see them, like I said, having that blessed year as they did last year. Goff had a come down at the end of last year, so I'm just not big on Cooper Kupp coming back super early from a big injury, given all the talent they already had at that position. Just not buying into him at all, really. And then the last name I'm going to go on this list is AJ Green. He finished last year averaged around 16, and I expect the Bengals, with the Browns getting better and the Ravens getting better, to really contend for that division this year. Even if the Steelers fall back, which I do expect them to do, they did lose a bunch of tough games and they could always win that division. Wouldn't shock me. I would expect the Bengals to win that division, probably the least out of those teams. He hasn't been a top 10 receiver since 2015, and kind of like with Kupp on Fantasy Pros, right now he is the number 10 receiver. So you're kind of banking him on being healthy at the end of the year, which he didn't do last year. You're banking on the Bengals being good, which I wouldn't bank on. And you're banking on an age 30 wide receiver and Andy Dalton throwing him the football with Taj Boyd up and coming last year and benefited with AJ Green on the field. So Mixon should see an uptick. I think Green will take a fall back, and I definitely would not be picking him as a wide receiver 1. There are just so many names that I like around there. I'm not going to be taking the risk that AJ Green will be playing for me at the end of the year and beasting as a 30-year-old on the Bengals. So those are 5 guys that I really feel like might be falling. in terms of next year's fantasy season, guys. At the end of my videos from now on, I'm going to be posting a subscribe button in the corner, as well as some relevant videos to what I've been talking about in terms of this one and the NFL preseason. But with other videos, I'll post the other relevant playlists that you guys can take a look on. And I look forward to all your guys' feedback, answering your questions, hearing what you guys think, whether or not you even agree with me, disagree with me. I love to hear the disagreeing feedback too. Helps me get better as a fantasy player, and that's all of our aim here. So it's really great talking to you guys, and I'll hopefully see you tomorrow with another video. All right, take it easy.